Hello, I'm Steve. I'm a game engineer and a code composer. Been doing that for about 30 years, and you know me as CodeSmile because I'm here to improve your work-smile balance. So hold on while I boot up. This is gonna be, basically I want to express why I did CodeSmile AssetDatabase, my own wrapper, and besides being fed up with that, I wanted to show you what the state of asset scripting is, and it's terrible. And it has been, in my experience, and it has been responsible for some of the worst performance degradations ever in any project. It's not Unity getting slower, it's your projects getting bigger, and the asset scripts that were bad all along, they just take a much, much bigger hit as the projects grow. So, God save us all, or whatever you believe in. I'll start with a chuckle here. You can read that code, right? And then reason about it. Delete an asset, save an asset. Did you ever system.io file delete and then do system.io file save? No, it just doesn't make any sense, and it just shows developers do this out of habit. Cargo code programming, that's what it's called. It gets even worse. Like sometimes you just destroy an in-memory object and then save assets. You know, better be safe than sorry. So this is the classic triumvirate. That's what I call it. And this one here is like some graph tool, node edit. Every time you add a node, add object to asset, save assets, refresh. And sometimes these get swizzled around. And this one's interesting because not just because of the method switching around, refreshing and then saving assets. So does one not have an effect on the other? But the curious part is creating assets. Create asset. So someone thought, or maybe didn't think about it, so it's either out of habit adding refresh and save assets, or someone thought create asset creates some kind of asset that's in a lingering in-memory state and needs saving and refreshing. No, but part of that is maybe because of the naming, create asset. We also have create instance, which is an in-memory object, create asset. We have to know that an asset represents a file on disk, but it's also a Unity engine object, which is in memory. And so I think that's part of the big confusion here. We don't have an actual asset class, like in my CodeSmile AssetDatabase. And let me quickly take your attention to save assets and refresh. What do these do too? Ignore me. So save assets, right? All dirty assets written to disk. Okay, might be slow, might be just the asset that you're working with, might be any dirty asset for any reason. So you're basically stalking other people's assets, other scripts' assets, because someone might have made a change that shouldn't have been saved, that shouldn't get saved. That's what you're doing with save assets. Problem is Unity added save asset if dirty, singular, in Unity 2020, but they chose to call it not save asset, but save asset if dirty. And because of that if dirty, that condition, it feels less reliable to developers. So they still use save assets rather than save asset if dirty. Anyhow, but the biggie here is refresh. You probably never thought about what this does. And there's a talk from Unity itself on some Unite conference. You should really watch this, because refresh scans your entire assets tree for changes. Every file, whether you have 100 in there or 1,000 or 100,000, you can imagine that just enumerating all these files takes a while, and it takes a lot longer the more assets you have in your project. And it's not just that. When it finds files that were modified, it will import them, sure. Now this runs all the importers, sure. Maybe that's what you want, maybe not. But the real biggie is it does also call unload unused resources. And what that does is like every time you click on something in the project view or any script that calls load asset and loads something, next time you do that, that's fast because the object's already loaded. It's in memory. It's in a cache, basically. Refresh. Well, it throws away that cache. So every time after refresh, any object that isn't persisted in memory, basically due to references, is getting thrown away. Next time you click on it, or next time you run that script, it will need to load that asset from disk, and that's slow. And this is the behavior of refresh. How much it affects your project depends a lot on where it's called, how often it's called, and what the project is, right? And what the project itself does. So this has severe implications, and you better stay clear of that refresh. And again, naming refresh. It sounds so innocuous. It's like repaint, or even repaint sounds more time consuming than refresh. Refresh is like, just like, oh, I just need to go in the bath and refresh. No. You go in the cellar. You go all the way down in the dungeon and go through each and every cellar and clean them until they shine and whatnot. This is an expensive, potentially expensive operation. Okay. But let's look at ForceReserializing. That was actually new to me, because I found this convoluted save script that puts the save in a delayed call in another class. That's a utility that does save a single asset, which assigns to some static property a path and then nulls it again. In between, you have save assets. Oh, yeah, there's an asset post processor that runs, and then it does something with that single asset. So you have a 3-step saving process. Totally whacked, but this one is what this comment here to do. Look into AssetDatabase ForceReserialize assets. For what reason? Saving. This method, ForceReserialize assets, again, badly named. It basically loads the asset and saves it back. And the idea is that if you switch to editor versions, you upgrade your editor version. And the serialization format of Unity's internal native assets, materials, animation controllers, prefabs, and whatnot, they get loaded and saved back, and you have a new format. And this keeps your source control history clean and whatnot. So this is a one-time operation after you update. And again, ForceReserialize assets. It tells you exactly what it does, but not why. And that's what a method should call out. It should call out update serialization versions, something like that, right? And so users get the idea in some procedural terrain generator to make a save button that actually ForceReserialize assets that single asset. So it might work, but it's just not the right thing to do here. And we don't know what else it does. It might be much slower than saving. We don't know that. And just to top it off, we can just like double down on that and ForceReserialize everything and then save everything. Like ForceReserializing. What is serializing? Serializing is saving to disk. Or yeah, not quite, but still, I mean, it has assets in there. Assets always means files on disk. So reserialize assets. It's already saved. There's no point in saving again. Anyhow, sometimes you get that occasional programmer who's wary of saving anyone's assets and just thinks like, okay, I could just like only save my asset. Still does ForceReserialize that one asset. Oh God, why? Because even if you want to have the version updated, once you dirty that object and save it back, that's the same as ForceReserialize, because you're saving it in the new version already. Not necessary here. Again, maybe this is getting real worse. This is from some elaborate tutorial. We have an on-post process all assets. This method runs every time you import, delete, move, or rename an asset. So it runs pretty often. And there's a for each. It goes over all files that are affected. And there's a whole bunch of code in there. And somewhere in there, n gets incremented. And when n gets incremented only once, it calls AssetDatabase ForceReserialize assets. No parameters. Every Unity native asset gets reserialized, loaded from disk, written back to disk. And happening every time you import, delete, move, or rename, right? Potentially. Not sure, it's not guaranteed, but this is just like, this is like you're walking on a cliff edge. It's dangerous. It's a fine line between, okay, it works fine, but it might just break on someone else's project big time. So let's talk about refresh again. Times X. I mean, once is not enough. Creating an asset refresh, no matter that you're refreshing down here already anyway, but this is just no code missing in between here. It's just refresh and then refresh again. Why? We don't know. And this gets worse. Refresh thrice. This means 3 times. Nice word. Like that. Had to look it up. Move packages into assets. Some method, refresh. Some method, refresh. Some method with refresh. And that's in a single method. 3 refreshes at a time. And these extra methods here, they only call AssetDatabase move asset and AssetDatabase delete asset. So this is all internal, AssetDatabase internal stuff that's happening. You know, the AssetDatabase doesn't just move an asset and forget about where it is, or delete it and forgot that it's deleted. You don't need refresh here. Absolutely not. And definitely not 3 times. It gets even worse. That was one gigantic editor script. And actually, I want to just point out that, you know, when you create a directory, refresh, sure, that works. That makes that directory appear in the project view. But the right thing to do here is called import asset stream path. Because a path, a folder, is just another asset. And you can import that to make it appear when you create it outside of the asset database, which you do here. Directory create directory is not asset database, doesn't know about it. So you either need to refresh or import that asset. And again, as we talked, refresh, be wary of that. Use import asset. Be very specific with what you do with the assets. And then at the very end of the script, I thought, okay, not a refresh, but it's safeguarded with the if. And curious indentation here, by the way. Oh, wait. That if directory exists, directory delete. So that means this AssetDatabase refresh stands by itself, and this runs in an editor application.update method. Every update in the editor refreshes the asset database. This means basically you have, when you have that script in your project, you have no in-memory editor cache. Any object that gets loaded, as soon as it's no longer referenced by anything, gets unloaded immediately. Great. Just what we need. And then never stop start. Like stop and start asset editing are meant to batch file operations, asset database file operations. I've seen scripts do start stop asset editing and not even call a single asset database method. That's pointless. But the main thing is Unity says and warns about this. Put those in try finally, because if you have an exception in between, it would leave the asset database in a stopped state. It would not import any assets anymore. So you'd have to close the project and reopen it. So I find this script, it starts out great. Yeah, you have this try finally. Never mind the disallow auto refresh. Some people do that to add it to a start asset editing. And again, they don't think about this. And again, this is part of the bad naming, because disallow auto refresh, start asset editing, that has no refresh in there. But of course, you wouldn't like stop the asset database, but still do auto refreshes. That makes no sense if you think about it. So you can just omit that. So we have try start asset editing. Sometimes you find this just before the try. That's okay if it's the last statement before the try. That's also okay. But most would put it in the try. But the finally, where's the stop asset editing here? That's curious. And this is some Unity SDK from some company. And you immediately see the over-engineering, enterprise stuff. New instance of a helper class, whatever, execute that. And in there, you have another new somewhat helper, execute that. And this triggers an event method. And finally, you end up with a script that does stop asset editing, refresh, auto refresh. Still, if there's an exception, it would not do the finally, and the asset database would be stopped. And that's from developers who get paid to do some projects, SDKs for other developers. That terrifies me. And it's got to stop. But it's getting even worse. This is an auto LOD tool. Not sure if that is any popular, I hope not. Just based on that code. This is in on-will save asset. So every time you save something, It goes through a loop, checks all the path. If it's a .unity file, .unity is a scene. So every time you save a scene, contains. So every time you save a file that happens to be either a scene or happens to have .unity somewhere in its name. No idea what that does in that case. Probably say the same thing, but you don't want that in that. It's not good there. But it's getting worse. So there's no try finally here. So, and plenty of opportunity here for an exception to come up. Oops, wait, sorry. Yeah, and then you have this loop over all root game objects in the scene. So this goes over each and every root object and then calls this persist LOD method. And what this does is it walks your scene hierarchy, the entire scene hierarchy. Each and every single game object in your scene when you save goes down there, down the rabbit hole, tries to find its components, and eventually might create assets, might throw an exception, leave the asset database in a stop state. But even if it works, yeah, the auto part, okay, is sufficiently there, but the performance is down the drain. I would not want to have that in any decently complex scene. Seriously. And that just boggles my mind. So, and yeah, I'm not even in the WTF section here. So the best is yet to come. Oh, the enjoyment. Like, this is really superior gold-plated quality code that you will be seeing now. This is Load Asset Extreme Edition. It's not enough to load an asset and return that. No. You need to force reserialize that loaded asset back to disk and then refresh the entire asset database. And then you can return that object. Squeaky clean. It's never been as loaded as before, ever before. It's so loaded, you cannot imagine ever working with another asset that wasn't loaded this good, right? Yeah, okay, okay. You catch my drift. That's stupid. But you can go even further. This is in an initialize and load script, which means the static constructor here runs as soon as the project opens. That's the very first time you can have an editor script, a custom user script running. And the first thing it does, light mapping for stop. So if you ever wonder why your light mapping in your project isn't working at all, might be that script. The rest is fortunately under is batch mode condition. Still, we just loaded that project. Why would we need to refresh settings and refresh the whole asset database and then save assets? There cannot possibly be anything that's unsaved or needs refreshing. Please think about this. And lastly, one of the first things I found was this commit message. Fix asset database didn't refresh after deleting an asset, resulting in a crash when using asset database again. And instantly I knew there was something up there. And I look into that script and see, okay, that's a mono behavior. It doesn't have execute and load in editor or execute always. So it's a pure runtime script. And inside awake, it calls asset database methods. Delete asset refresh, create asset refresh. Maybe that refresh fixed the crash, who knows? But the crash is probably first place because you're calling asset database methods at runtime. And I'm surprised this even works and doesn't throw a big warning. So, oh yeah. So that said, those are just some of the examples. In my experience, a lot of times when the editor is slow, developers are quick to blame Unity. But actually, a lot of times it's bad editor scripting that slows things down by a lot. So I have a practical joke for you, sort of. Search your project for instances of these methods and see if you can find them and let me know. And I can also help make an assessment whether that is really necessary or potentially dangerous or whatnot. Let me know down in the comments. And otherwise, thank you for watching this. This is really my kind of passion here, to drive home a point. We need to do better editor scripting, because a lot of projects depend on it, and a lot of time goes down the drain because of the crap that I just showed you. And that is partially because I rate CodeSmile AssetDatabase in the hope that eventually some users will have to rethink and then realize, okay, for one, this is easy, and there's no doubt about it. This is there's way fewer potential for messing things up, and you have to leave your habits down the road, leave it by the side, whatever. And there's not much relearning, but just having this slightly different should be enough to fix all these. Hopefully, I'm hopeful. So would you kindly, if you like this, like my video and subscribe, and also start my GitHub repositories and tell your friends about it, your coworkers, your dog, your family, your CTO, whoever. We need to get this word out that we are doing crap work with the asset database. So that's it. I'll send you a THX and wish you cleaner code.